the first thing you need to ask yourself is this. What would make a future king decide that silence is no longer enough? Not a tabloid headline, not another interview, not even another public accusation. What would push a man raised to protect the crown at all costs to make a move so severe that royal watchers would later describe it with just two chilling words: disowned, quietly? Because whatever you think you know about Prince William and Prince Harry, this story does not begin with anger. It begins with restraint. Years of it. And when restraint finally breaks, the result is far more devastating than any shouted argument could ever be. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. So let me ask you something uncomfortable right from the start. What if the most brutal family rejection doesn't come with a press release? What if it comes with absence? For months, even years, people waited for a dramatic confrontation, a fiery statement, a public feud, something explosive. But that's not how power works in royal families. Power moves slowly, silently, and when it moves, it leaves scars that never show on camera. This is the story of how two brothers who once walked side by side through unimaginable grief arrived at a moment where one of them reportedly decided the other no longer existed in his future. And if you think this moment came out of nowhere, think again. Because long before any announcement, long before the headlines, there were warning signs hiding in plain sight. Pause for a second and picture this. Two boys, one destiny, one spare, both grieving their mother, both watched by the world, but only one was ever allowed to break. From the outside, Prince William and Prince Harry were sold to us as inseparable, the Diana boys, united by tragedy, bound by blood, smiling through pain. The image was powerful, comforting even, a symbol that the monarchy could still feel human. But behind palace walls, the reality was far more complicated. William learned early that emotion was a liability, that the crown came before the self, that one day, everything he loved would be weighed against duty, and duty would always win. Harry learned something different. He learned that he was allowed to feel, allowed to rage, allowed to fall apart. Because he wasn't the one who would wear the crown. That difference shaped everything. As they grew older, the gap widened. Not loudly, quietly, like a crack in a wall that no one notices until the structure starts to fail. William became controlled, strategic, reserved, every move measured, every word filtered through centuries of expectation. Harry became restless, open, volatile, searching for something the institution could never give him: unconditional loyalty. And here's the first contradiction most people miss. The very freedom Harry envied William for having power was the same freedom William envied Harry for having none of the burden. Two brothers, two prisons, just built differently. So when Harry fell in love, really fell, it didn't just change his life. It threatened the balance William had spent years trying to maintain. But let's be clear, this isn't a story about villain and victim. It's a story about collision. When Meghan entered the picture, the monarchy saw a storm approaching. Some welcomed it, some feared it. William, according to multiple royal commentators and reported accounts, saw something else entirely: acceleration. Not danger, speed. Everything was happening fast. Too fast. Engagement, marriage, public statements, a new style, a new narrative. And with each step forward, the gap between the brothers widened. Here's where things get uncomfortable. Because according to royal watchers, William didn't explode. He didn't threaten. He didn't issue ultimatums. He warned. Quiet conversations, private moments, brother to brother. Warnings that weren't about love, but about consequences. About what happens when personal battles are fought on public stages. About how the institution always fights back, even when it looks silent. And Harry didn't hear caution. He heard control. That misunderstanding may have been the moment everything became irreversible. Ask yourself this. When someone believes they are finally being protected for the first time, how likely are they to listen to warnings that sound like restriction? From Harry's perspective, this was liberation. From William's, it was destabilization. And this is where the story starts to matter now. Because what followed wasn't just disagreement. It was a fundamental clash of values. One brother believed survival meant transparency. The other believed survival meant containment. You cannot reconcile those philosophies inside a monarchy. So the exit happened. And people call it a departure, a choice, a clean break. But for William, according to insiders, it felt like something far more personal. Not just leaving the job, leaving the pact. The unspoken agreement that no matter what, the family protected the institution, and the institution protected the family. When that line was crossed publicly, repeatedly, something shifted. Here's where the narrative most people get wrong. They assume William reacted emotionally, that he lashed out, that he retaliated. But what if the truth is colder? What if William didn't respond at all, because he was already making a decision? In royal families, words are weapons. Silence is finality. Invitations stopped coming. Defenses stopped being offered. Titles were left exposed to public attack. Moments passed without acknowledgement. At first, people thought it was temporary. A cooling-off period. A strategy. But then it kept happening. And that's when royal commentators began whispering something extraordinary. That this wasn't distance anymore. This was detachment. Not punishment. Erasure. Think about how devastating that is. To be attacked, you still matter. To be ignored, you no longer do. And that brings us to the phrase people keep repeating. We disown you. Not because it was said, but because it was shown. Every monarchy has a breaking point. A moment where personal loyalty must be sacrificed to preserve the institution. History is full of them. Brothers, sons, even mothers and daughters. Cut off not with rage, but with protocol. William grew up knowing this. Watching it. Studying it. Preparing for it, whether he wanted to or not. So when faced with a brother who refused to stop turning private grievances into global narratives, William reportedly made the hardest decision of his life. Not to fight back, but to step away completely. And here's the most unsettling part of all. According to those who study the monarchy closely, this decision wasn't about anger toward Harry. It was about fear. Fear of precedent. Fear of instability. Fear that if the future king allowed public defiance to go unanswered, the crown itself would weaken. That's the weight William carries. Not just as a brother, but as a symbol. So ask yourself again, what would it take for a man like that to choose duty over blood? Because the answer isn't one moment. It's 1,000 small ones. Conversations ignored. Boundaries crossed. Lines redrawn. And once that final line is crossed, there is no dramatic announcement. No emotional speech. Just absence. But here's the question no one wants to ask yet. If William has truly closed that door, was he protecting the monarchy? Or was he abandoning the last piece of his own childhood? Because once a future king decides someone no longer fits into his reign, history tells us one thing with brutal clarity. That decision is rarely reversed. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be born into royalty? Not the glitz. Not the headlines. Not the red carpets or the crown jewels. I'm talking about the weight you inherit the moment you draw your first breath. For Prince William and Prince Harry, that weight came in two very different forms. One was trained to carry a kingdom. The other was trained to watch, to observe, to survive in the shadow. The royal world doesn't just create heirs and spares. It molds them, shapes them, defines them. And sometimes, that shaping creates a fault line so deep, it takes decades for anyone to notice. From the outside, William and Harry seemed inseparable. Public appearances, charitable work, sports, royal tours, brothers side by side, smiling, waving, embodying unity in tragedy. But those images hide a crucial truth. The monarchy isn't just about blood. It's about purpose. And purpose is not equally distributed. The heir is a project from birth. Everything he does is measured against the crown. Every word he speaks, every action he takes, every thought he has must align with centuries of tradition. It's a gilded cage, yes, but a cage with immense responsibility. The spare, on the other hand, exists as a buffer, a mirror, a shadow. There is freedom, yes, but also invisibility. He can falter, rebel, or break, and the crown can absorb it. That dynamic is more than just a phrase. It's the invisible rift that would shape these brothers' entire relationship. Consider William. From the moment he could walk, he was groomed, observed, tested, his mistakes scrutinized, his successes celebrated, but always through the lens of what he would one day inherit. He learned to calculate, to anticipate, to hold emotion at arm's length. In private moments, even with his closest friends, restraint was the constant theme. To overstep, to falter emotionally, to allow personal feeling to override duty, that was not an option. and the world watched, waiting for him to become not just a man, but a king. Now consider Harry. Different upbringing, different expectations. He was free to express, to lash out, to rebel. Not that anyone wanted him to fail, but because his role allowed room for mistakes. The spare doesn't carry the kingdom on his shoulders. He carries the legacy of what the kingdom wants the heir to learn. There's a freedom in that, yes, but it comes with consequences. Freedom without consequence becomes a temptation to test limits. And Harry, throughout his life, did not just test limits. He pushed against them relentlessly. And that created tension, even before Meghan Markle, even before interviews, even before the headlines. Here's an interesting fact many people miss. The heir and spare dynamic has historical roots. In every monarchy, the spare serves a dual purpose. 1. To protect the bloodline from extinction. 2. To absorb mistakes that might otherwise threaten the throne. It's a brilliant, cruel, and precise system. But it comes at a cost. The spare learns early that he can be both indispensable and irrelevant at the same time. The heir learns early that love, loyalty, and forgiveness are luxuries he can rarely afford. So, when the brothers were teenagers, even young adults, there were early signs of divergence. Small things, subtle things. Public appearances where William's focus was on protocol, while Harry's attention was elsewhere. Conversations where one sought to strategize and the other to confide. Conflicting expectations from staff, tutors, and advisors. Each small divergence laid another brick in the fault line between them. Add to that the lingering trauma of losing Diana. That shared grief should have united them. In many ways, it did. But trauma also manifests differently depending on personality and position. William, carrying the weight of a future throne, had to process grief in private, controlled, measured ways. Harry, the spare, could allow himself moments of recklessness, visible anger, and public sorrow. The world cheered him for his authenticity, but behind palace walls, that authenticity sometimes read as defiance, as distraction, as irresponsibility. And that misunderstanding would fester. By the time Meghan Markle entered the picture, that fault line was already a chasm. But even before her, William and Harry's lives followed diverging paths. William's path was largely predictable: school, military service, charitable work, preparation for kingship. Harry's path had more unpredictability: adventurous, impulsive, sometimes reckless. The monarchy tolerated it. The public adored it. But the differences in responsibility created unspoken tension. It's like two siblings in a family business. One is preparing to take over as CEO, the other is free to make mistakes. But every mistake is observed, cataloged, and remembered. And yet, for all the tension, there was loyalty. There were moments of genuine camaraderie, of protection. William would step in when the press turned hostile. Harry would defend William when needed. But those moments, as fleeting as they were, could not bridge the growing ideological gap between them. One brother believed that survival meant strict adherence to protocol. The other believed survival meant following one's own truth. And those philosophies, while not inherently incompatible, were incompatible within the confines of the institution they were bound to serve. Ask yourself this: how often do you see siblings grow apart because one's life is predetermined and the other's life is unrestrained? Now imagine that life is under the microscope of the global media, scrutinized by historians, journalists, and public opinion alike. Every misstep is magnified. Every decision is symbolic. And every perceived betrayal becomes a headline. That's the pressure these two brothers lived under long before the world heard about Megxit. This is where it starts to get even more complex. William's sense of responsibility isn't just inherited. It's learned through observation of past monarchs. Every generation before him faced choices between family and duty. History is full of examples where loyalty to bloodlines had to yield to the survival of the institution. And the consequences of ignoring that lesson are not theoretical. They are real, lasting, and brutal. William grew up absorbing those lessons, internalizing them, becoming someone who could one day make impossible decisions without hesitation. Harry, in contrast, saw history differently. He saw loyalty to family as paramount. Love, affection, and emotional connection were critical. And yes, he respected duty, but he also saw its limitations. Where William learned to sacrifice personal happiness for the greater good, Harry learned that life without loyalty to one's own heart was meaningless. That fundamental difference, a philosophical divide, was quietly shaping every interaction between them. So, by the time the conflicts that would define the public narrative began to surface, there was already a foundation for misunderstanding, disappointment, and, ultimately, estrangement. Meghan Markle may have been a catalyst, but she did not create the fault line. She exposed it. And the palace, accustomed to managing crises quietly, now had a situation where two brothers could no longer reconcile their values publicly without jeopardizing the crown itself. Think about this. William, trained to protect the monarchy at all costs, watching his brother publicly challenge protocol. Harry, believing that loyalty should come before duty, watching his brother prioritize the institution over the relationship. Two philosophies, locked in opposition. And once those philosophies were set in motion, nothing could reverse the trajectory.